sadhuveshaya shishya chitta vilasine vidita khila vedyaya moksha vigna vighatine Saumya Kashi nivasaya deshikaya viragine Chaitanyananda rupaya jivan muktaya mangalam Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahana Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahe Tejasvina Vadhitamastu Ma Vidvishavahe Om Shanti 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 Shri Sadgurudev Maharaj Ki Jai. Om Namah Shivaya. Welcome everybody. You hear me well? Okay. I want to continue to discuss about consciousness. Yesterday I mentioned that I want to make clear the distinction between the brain, the mind, and consciousness. But actually we didn't get to talk about it much. We talked more about consciousness and less about the mind and the brain. So I thought to start today with this, and we will see where it is taking us. Okay? As I mentioned yesterday, in the ancient times, when Shankaracharya lived, even before when the Upanishads were composed, they didn't know about the brain as we know it today, as the organs that govern all the functions of the body. And therefore, in their philosophy, there is no description of this. And today we have the challenge that we need to see their teaching in the light of the knowledge we have today. And it is not easy. It is not easy because, for many reasons, but also because the knowledge we have is continuously evolving. It keeps changing. So suppose we are able to bridge the knowledge we have today with these teachings, tomorrow we may have new knowledge, and it will be another challenge to make this bridge. Nevertheless, we have to do it because this is the prevailing knowledge, and we have somehow to make sense of it all. When we talk about the relationship between the brain and the mind, there are few options to go about it. One way is to ignore the mind. There is only brain. There's chemical reactions in the brain. We don't know exactly how it creates experience, but it does, evidently. And just leave it like that. We see it very often, but it is not satisfactory. Another way to relate to it is to take the brain as the hardware and say that the mind is the software. This also is limited because what happens when you destroy the hardware, the software also is gone. And it may be the case, we don't know, we need to check it out, but if it does, it won't fit into our teachings. So at least from our teachings point of view, this option doesn't work, and we need to see. I'm not a scientist. I don't have a formal scientific background. Nevertheless, I have a lot of interest, and I try to read and study whenever possible about science. And recently I saw an article in Scientific American, which was very interesting, about a procedure which is called, I hope I pronounce it correctly, it is called hemispherectomy. It is a process in which surgeons take out half of the patient's brain. It's not recommended procedure if you don't have to undergo it. They do it in extreme cases of seizures that are not responding to medications. When there is no other choice, they do it. They take half of the brain, and it may be the left side or the right side, depend on the issue. But the interesting thing is that to their amazement, they found that after taking half of the brain out, the person not only didn't lose the sense of I, this consciousness that we were talking about, the person didn't even lose his or her memory. Even after taking out half of the brain, either left side or right side, the person still retained the memory. And this is, of course, very surprising. They do lose, for example, the sight of the opposite. Suppose they take the left brain, they lose the right side sight, and the right hand become paralyzed. But they don't lose things like memory. And some of them, actually, it is reported after undergoing this procedure, they become distinguished in their fields. Not probably because they took the brain, but despite of taking half of the brain, they become distinguished in different fields. So this is, of course, is at least suggesting that it is not so simple that saying that the brain is the hardware and the mind is the software. Because when you destroy half of your hard disk, you cannot use that memory, that storage memory, right? Imagine we have our memories, they supposedly distributed in the brain, either in the left side or the right side or in both, I don't know. But when we take half, we expect to lose it. If it is not lost, it means it is probably not directly stored in the brain. Another way to look at this connection of the mind and the brain, which I find interesting and maybe more accurate, is to look at it like the relationships between radio waves and a radio receiver. Radio waves are present even right here, right now. There is music here in this room, we don't hear. There are radio waves with probably Bahamian reggae, and you don't hear it. Why you don't hear it? Because we don't have here a radio receiver that can take these signals and translate them into audible output. The brain, in this case, may serve as the hardware, as the radio receiver, which has the capacity to take the mental stuff, whatever it is. Soon we will talk about it in Vedantic language, but right now we are trying to talk about it in our language. The radio receiver, the brain, is translating these mental waves into something familiar, into what we call our experience. Our experience is coming through the brain, but it is not coming from the brain. And therefore, even if you take half the brain, you are not losing the signals. You may just lose functionality of the receiver. Now imagine a radio receiver which is get damaged. Suppose there is some hole in the speaker drum. So you will still hear a music, but this music will be distorted. It will be some not understandable noise instead of beautiful music. Or it may move between different stations automatically by itself. If there is any problem, what I'm trying to say is, if there is any problem in the radio receiver, it will definitely affect the way we receive these signals. But it doesn't mean that there is a problem in the radio waves. In other words, when we see people with brain damage, it is definitely affecting their functioning. We see, there is a very beautiful book which I love, which is called The Man Who Mistook His Wife for a Hat. It's very famous, of Oliver Sacks. He describes very interesting cases of people with different brain damages cases and the way it affects them. So how can we understand it? If we accept this model of radio receiver versus radio waves, we can say that when the receiver is being damaged, it's definitely affecting the way we receive the music, even though the radio waves are not affected. In the same way, even if the mind is okay, when the brain is damaged, it will affect the way we function and the way we do things. There is no problem. It works. Okay? Now, what about consciousness in relation to all this? Where consciousness come in this analogy? We have the radio receiver is the brain. We have the radio waves. This is the mind. And what is the electricity? Electricity, we call it the prana. Okay? This is the energy where we got the power source. But where is consciousness in it? The answer is, now I'm getting back to Vedanta, the answer is that consciousness is not in this example. Why? Because consciousness is not an actor, is not a doer. And this is a very important point that we need to understand. It becomes very difficult to see it because of our tendency to constantly identify consciousness with different aspects of the mind, with the intellect, with the ego, with thoughts and different things. We have this tendency to identify with them, and therefore we imagine consciousness to be active. As a matter of fact, as a matter of philosophy, according to the Advaita Vedanta, consciousness is not a doer. There is no any action in consciousness. Then what is consciousness? And who is doing the actions? The way we look at it is that consciousness is constant and it is changeless. It is one, it is infinite, and it is eternal. When we talk about the movie screen, Peter in his lecture gave this beautiful example, and he gave the example of the white light, right? The white light, which is the projector, but this projector is being screened through the film, and that creates the projection of movie, of drama taking place on the screen. This is a better example. This is a better example to understand consciousness. Consciousness is just that white light which includes within it everything, but itself is never doing, is never an actor. It is just there. In that example also, consciousness is the screen, but that's why it is making it a little more difficult to see, because where is the movie projected? It is projected within consciousness. It is not projected outside. Okay? Every action, every happening is taking place always in the mental level. It never happens on the level of consciousness. If we say that consciousness is doing anything, if we say that consciousness is an actor, then we run into a lot of philosophical problems. First of all, when we say that consciousness is an actor, it means that it is changeful. Why? Because an actor is changing. There is a before the action, during the action, and after the action. It is different. When I'm sitting quiet as a person, not doing anything, it is one thing. And then when I'm active, it is something else. So there is change. Something which is changeful, and this is a little subtle point, but also very important point, something which is changeful is temporary, is limited in time. Only something which is completely changes can be eternal. Why? As a matter of fact, change is just another word for death. Or death is just another word for change. It is the same thing. When we see change, it means that one thing is gone, that old self or old thing is gone, and now there is something new. So the change itself is a form of death. So if we admit that consciousness is a doer, it means there is a change within consciousness. It means also that consciousness is temporary. It is coming and going. In our tradition, we say that the self, consciousness, is eternal. But even if we don't accept it, we will have to start looking for, okay, if consciousness, that consciousness yesterday we demonstrated it is not the body, we demonstrated it is not the mind, then we have to ask, so where it's beginning, when it starts, where is its end? Where are the borders of consciousness? You see, my experience is that consciousness is confined to this body. But is it so? Is consciousness confined to this body? And why would it be confined to the body? Consciousness is not physical. And consciousness is not even mental, is not the mind. Why it should be confined to the mind? It is not. And when I'm aware of something that is 100 yards from me, is my consciousness not encompass that too, all this space? Right? In our system, we say that consciousness is permanent and changeless. Now, in other systems, they say that consciousness is temporary like everything else, particularly in some Buddhist traditions. They say consciousness is part of the mind, and it is temporary like everything else. We have moments of consciousness, and it is coming and it is going. Therefore, it is just like everything else. Why do we need to assume that consciousness is permanent and changeless? Well, one way to answer this question is that change is always in relation to something which is changeless. I'm saying again, change is always in relation to something which is changeless. What do I mean? I will give you a simple example. You sit in the train in India, in the station, waiting for the train to start. Okay? You sit by the window, and just on the next rail there is another train, also standing. And you sit, you read your book, and suddenly in the corner of your eye, you start, actually before the corner, you start to feel that you are moving. And in the corner of your eye, you see the other train moving backward. Okay? Or actually, what happens is you feel that you are moving forward. Right? You see it and you think that you are moving forward. You say, oh, good, we started. Because you see the other train is moving that direction. And then you look in the other window, you see there is no movement. So you realize, it's not we are moving. They are moving backward. It is not that we are moving forward, right? We all have similar experiences. What happens here? What happens is that initially, I took the other train to be my reference point, my static reference point. And in relation to that, I was moving. Only when I looked on the other side and realized, oh no, we are not moving, I am the static reference point, I realized, oh, the change is not here, the change is in the other train. Right? If I ask you, am I moving now or I'm sitting in one place? The answer is, depends. If your reference point is planet Earth, then I'm sitting in one place. But if your reference point is the sun, then I'm moving quite fast, is it not? Along with the Earth. If your reference point is the center of the galaxy, I'm moving even much faster. We all know it, right? I don't need to go on. In order to be aware of change, there must be a changeless entity or something which is a reference point. In our philosophy in Advaita Vedanta, we say that the reference point for all changes perceived is that changeless consciousness. I am that reference point. When I sit for meditation, close my eyes and observe the passing thoughts of my mind. What is the reference point for this passage? What is the static, changeless reference point in relation to which everything changes? This is me. I am aware of the different thoughts. Suppose I was a thought, then in the next moment I will not be there to see another thought. You see the point? If I am the thought, even if I'm a thought aware of another thought, it doesn't matter. The moment this thought goes and another thought comes, it is somebody else. How you create this connection? There must be a reference point which is changeless and which is aware of every different thought. This changeless reference point is consciousness. This is who am I, right here and right now. I am that witnessing consciousness which is observing, which is aware of the phenomena that is taking place in the mind and in the external world. And actually, as all the lectures said, there is no really external world in this sense. We are only aware of what happens inside, right? Again, Peter was saying there is no red here. It is just the way the brain interprets all these things. So consciousness is basically aware of the mind. That's it. Whether there is something outside or there is not something outside, this is a different question. But all of our awareness is pertaining the mind. Now, I want to discuss a little bit about the mind. a little bit more, we will call it Vedic psychology. Okay, just the way in our system we present or represent the functioning of the mind, it will help us to understand how to work with the mind and how to be able to grow spiritually. Let's talk about perception. When we perceive an object, there is a very rapid process going on in the mind. In Vedanta, the mind is divided into 4 parts. Okay, actually the mind is one. Okay, but it is divided, just for the sake of discussion, to make it easier to understand, it is divided into 4 different parts. The first part is called manas, the mind. Okay, I will explain each one of them soon. The second one is called chitta. Chitta means the subconscious mind, so to say. I will explain that too. The third one is called the intellect or buddhi. And the last one is called ahankara or ego. So we have the mind, subconscious mind, intellect, and ego. Okay? Together they work in the process of perception. And I will give you a simplistic example how it works. Very simple explanation. I look at an object, my favorite stainless steel glass. Okay? Information is carried to my eye, from the eye to the brain, etc. In our system, we say the indriyas, the senses, are carrying the information to the mind, and it is presented there in the mind. The mind, in this sense, is like a monitor, or is like the what you call it? The processing unit of the computer? CPU, yes, thank you. Or the CPU, where the information is coming, and it's kind of, it is presented. At this moment, it doesn't have any meaning. It's just some information which is carried to the eye. It has no name, and it has no particular context or memories associated with it, anything. It is just information carried inside. Then the buddhi, which is the intellect, is coming into the picture. He goes back to the archives. The archives is the chitta. Chitta is like the storage house of all my past impressions. Okay? The intellect is going back to the chitta, and it starts looking for something that can resemble what is presented here, because I have no name for it at this moment, what it can be. There is a particular shape, particular color, maybe a texture, if we have some sensual information from the skin. And the intellect is comparing, looking in many different departments, many different folders, and finally, bingo, I found it. He's coming back running to the manas saying, found it. We got an answer. At this point, the 4th part of the mind is entering the picture, the ahankara, the ego. The ego is getting this information, which is stainless steel glass, and it comes up saying, I know. This is a glass. This is a stainless steel glass. This is the process, how it works, and of course it happens very, very fast. It comes inside, and as soon as it comes, we come up with the explanation, and the ego comes and say, I know, this is a glass, or this is my glass, right? This is even more. It becomes now, the ego becomes a possessor. It becomes my own glass. Okay? Now, in this process, when we sit for meditation, experienced meditators will be able to separate that information carried in before it gets the naming, before it gets the labeling from the ego, be able to recognize it, and then see how the ego is coming and just take charge and responsibility for what is taking place. Okay, in meditation it is possible to see. Normally it happens very fast and we don't have the ability to observe it and to see. Immediately the naming come along with the perception. And then the ego goes on and gives commentary about it and start to say so many things about this glass. This is to some extent this little voice that we all have inside our head. We become acutely aware of this voice when we sit for meditation. It comes and it starts to give a lot of commentaries for what is going on. This is the voice of the ego. That ego, which is part of the mind, it is a faculty of the mind, is what causing us to identify with the body and the mind. This I-ness and my-ness, this is how we call it, I-ness and my-ness, which means the sense of I. I am tall, I am short, I am smart, I am stupid, I am from here, I am going there. All this I-ness is the work of this ego. And then also my-ness. This is my glass, this is my friend, he is my enemy, he is not mine. By the way, when we talked about perception, the ego sometimes, if the intellect doesn't find any information regarding this, he will come to the ego and say, I don't find anything. So the ego is coming and say, I don't know what it is. So I don't know what it is just the same as saying this is a glass, because it is just the ego coming forward and taking charge, taking over what is going on. This recognition, this process is not of consciousness. This is the subtlety that we need to understand. Consciousness is the white light. Consciousness is just a witness standing there and observing. All this identification, I am, this is mine, this is that, this should be like that, etc. These are all works of the ego. This is all part of the mind. Okay? When we talk about realization, realization comes about when we break this identification. When we are able to stop the identification with the ego, our consciousness, which is ever present, assert itself. It is as if when, you know, in old days when there were these movie projectors with the film running in front of the white light, what will happen, you know, in the middle of the movie, they run out of the one film and they have to put the other one. What happens when we run out of the film? We see what? The white light, right? What we see on the screen is that same white light which is always there, but now it is not filtered. In the same manner, when we stop our identification with the body and the mind completely, then that which is our nature is able to shine forth. We have no words to use. We had a little discussion about it today. The word experience is not a good word because it is again a process. It is not a process, it is just the natural state. It is what it is. Right? we need to learn how to undo this identification with the body and the mind. Sri Ramakrishna Paramhamsa had a sweet story that described this ego, the work of this ego. He said it is like an Indian wedding. Anybody here have been in an Indian wedding? It's a big deal, right? It's like 3 days, 4 days, sometimes big function. So many people come, it's like happy occasion. There is this Indian wedding, and there is one guy. He's very clever, he's very efficient. He is organizing everything. He is telling the waiters when to bring the food, where to put it. The guests that are coming, he tells them where to sit. He's just organizing the whole affairs of this wedding. At a certain point, the father of the groom is meeting the father of the bride. And he's telling him, you know, that guy you brought to organize here is he's doing such a wonderful job. The father of the groom said, indeed, he's doing a wonderful job, but we didn't invite him. He's not from our side, he's from your side. He said, no, he's not from our family. I don't know who is this guy. Really? I never saw this guy either, so who is he? They figure out that this guy just wanted a good meal, you know, and he came over and he figured out if he just take responsibility for everything, nobody will question him. And he goes on. Now they want to show him. They are looking for him. But he's cleverer than they are. And he already sees they talking and looking in his direction. By the time they figure out, he's already gone. Okay? This is the story about our ego. The ego is that guy who is coming and taking charge for everything. I am doing this, I am doing that. Now, I am lifting the glass, okay? I am lifting the glass. This is what I say. This is what I feel also. But if we accept what we said yesterday, that I am not the body, then who is lifting the glass? Am I lifting the glass? No, I'm not lifting the glass. It is the hand lifting the glass. Who is telling the hand to lift the glass? It is the mind telling the hand to lift the glass. I am neither the body nor the mind. I have nothing to do with the lifting of the glass. I am pure consciousness. I am just aware of the body and the mind. But because of my identification, because of my ignorance, I imagine that this is me who is lifting the glass. This is the ego. The ego is that guy who is coming, taking charge of everything that is taking place and saying, this is me, this is I am doing this, I am doing that. Truly speaking, there is no such a doer. So now we come to an ashram and we hear about it and we start to think, oh my God, this guy is not really invited here. The ego is not from my side, right? Let me go and find him and beat him up, right? That's what we say, and we start to look for the ego. What happens when we start to look for the ego? And that's the most interesting part in meditation. We have this little voice in our head which is going on repeatedly, continuously. When we start to turn the light of consciousness, the projector of our witness, onto this ego, it disappears. It is gone. There is nobody there. The ego is not an entity. It's a non-entity. It is a false imagined entity. It is not really there. When we really look at it, it is gone. It disappears. And we find it in meditation that we sit And normally what happens, we are carried away with it, we forget ourselves, and we go on with discussions inside our heads, forgetting that we are the witness. And then suddenly, after some time, we realize, hey, I'm just carried away by it. I'm resuming the position of a witness, just observing these passing of thoughts. What happened to the thoughts? People say, I don't know, they disappear. The moment I observe them, they are just disappear, they are gone. This is what happens to the ego when we look at it directly. Why the ego disappears when we look at it? Why the thoughts, the moment we resume the position of the witness and observe the thoughts, why do they tend to disappear? To understand this, we have to go into another subject and discuss it briefly. Forgive me, I'm running through many different topics. It is just a short lecture and we have to cover so much. So I hope I'm not confusing you with too many concepts. This is regarding the subconscious mind. How does it work? Our subconscious mind, I like to think about it as a sandbox. You know a sandbox that children play in? Imagine a sandbox which is completely leveled, and you take a stick in your hand and you run it through the sandbox. It creates an impression on the sandbox. It leaves a mark on the sandbox, right? On the sand. Whatever actions we do, either physical, verbal, or mental, something we do with our hands, with our feet, etc., something we say, or even something we think mentally, is leaving a residue, is leaving an impression in the subconscious mind. It is like running a stick in the sand. Later on, our subconscious mind is not the same. It has a different terrain, different surface, because it leaves an impression there. When I repeat the same action again, it is as if I run the same stick in the same groove, in the same mark again. What happens? Now it gets a little bit deeper, right? And if I repeat the same action again and again and again and again, what happens? It becomes a very deep groove in my subconscious mind. This is what we call a habit. What is a habit? I repeat the same actions many times, and now it becomes a second nature. I don't need to think about it. It is instinctive, right? The surface of our subconscious mind is full of all these tendencies, all these habits that I have created through so many actions. In our tradition, we believe in past lives. This is not the first time we are born, and therefore, also the impressions from actions done in previous lives are present in our subconscious mind. We say, since I am not the physical body, as we discussed yesterday, the beginning and the end of the physical body is not the beginning and the end of me. It is not even the beginning and the end of the mind. So we believe in past lives. Every actions taken place in any, either this life or past life, is being imprinted in the subconscious mind, and it is leaving a mark there. Okay? We call it, this mark we call samskara. This is the Sanskrit word. Samskara is that mental impression. And when it becomes very deep-rooted tendency, we call it vasana. Okay, let's try to remember these two terms. samskara and vasana. Samskara is the impression, vasana is the deep-rooted impression. Now, not every action is similar in strength, in power. Some actions leave a very small mark on the sand. Sometimes even one action can leave such a deep impression, such a deep groove in my subconscious mind that it will change me forever. What is that which decides? What is the deciding factor regarding the depth or the strength of this impression? What is going to determine what will be the nature of this impression? Is it going to be something casual, or is it going to be something very deep and important? The answer is emotions. Our emotions are the mobilizing force that carries the samskaras, carries the impressions. When I do an action absent-mindedly, without any strong emotion associated with it, it is leaving a mark, but this mark is very faint. It will not make much impression in my life. If I ask you, what did we eat the day before yesterday in breakfast? Who remembers? Can you tell me? You cannot tell me. Why? Because it is something we do every day. We need to feed the body. We feed the body, we eat, and yeah, we don't give it much importance. It is there. There is no emotion invested with this action. So it left some mark. It is somewhere there. Maybe under hypnosis, you will be able to bring it up and say what you ate the day before yesterday. I don't know. But it is not much. But suppose you were cooking yesterday, the day before yesterday, for the whole ashram. In the first time in your life, you're cooking for everybody, and you are so nervous and excited, and you are doing that favorite dish that you believe everybody should love, and you're really anxious that everybody will enjoy and appreciate it. And I ask you, what did you eat the day before yesterday? You will remember it after 100 years also, right? Why? What is the difference? There was a strong emotion and attention. Okay, I didn't say it emotion, but it is also with attention and intention. We had this discussion, attention and intention invested in it. And therefore, it becomes very powerful, very meaningful. I was teaching in a retreat for veterans a couple of weeks ago in Florida, and I gave them a similar lecture about this topic. And as I was talking, they were all people with PTSD, very severe cases of PTSD. And I was trying to connect it to trauma. And then it occurred to me that trauma is nothing but a single impression. Okay, I told them, this is what I told them. There are two types of traumas. There is one trauma which is created by a single effect, single event. Suppose you are in Iraq and there is a bomb exploding next to you, and half of your unit, your fellow soldiers, die and injured so badly. This is a single effect that can create a very deep trauma that will come back again and again and again and again into your life. Why it goes so deep? Now we understand. There is a very, very strong emotion and attention, intention, everything is invested. It doesn't have to be positive, it can be negative also. it is invested into one single moment, it will scar your subconscious mind forever. But then there is also another type of traumas, and these are traumas that are built up slowly. Very little events. Each one by itself is not so traumatic, but when they come up together, they create a very deep trauma. By the end of the lecture, to the veterans, one of them, I gave time for questions, and one of them said, "Can you please say again what you had to say about these two types of traumas?" I said, "Yes." And I said it again, a little differently, just to give it some more meaning. I just repeated the same thing. And that was it. In the evening, we had a bonfire, and we sat around the bonfire, and in the bonfire, each one of them is supposed to say his, how did they call it? Not highlight? I forgot. Something like the highlight of the day for each one of them. So when his turn came, he said, in Swami Kashi's lecture, I asked him to repeat what he said about the two types of traumas, because I was a soldier, I was a medical assistant. I was never in a battle. I was never in any very critical situation. My trauma came from seeing day after day, seeing people suffering so much, people who lost limbs, people who went under an extreme form of pain. But until today, I felt unlegitimate to be traumatized. I said to myself, how can I be traumatized? Look at these people. But today I understand that trauma is something that can build itself up slowly. And only today I feel that I can reconcile, I can accept my trauma fully. So that was very, very touching and very interesting for me. Anyway, then I told them, just as trauma can be of two types, negative, like one event creating very deep trauma, or successive small events creating trauma, we can take the same to the other side, to the positive side. It works the same on the mind to the other direction. In what way? We hear sometimes about people who had what we tend to call mystical experience. It is a single event in their life. For example, Jesus came to me, appeared before me, and that completely changed my life. Or I was sitting under the Bodhi tree and I got this very deep mystical experience, and after that I'm a different person. Or people reporting experiencing near-death experience, and when they come back, it completely changes their lives. This is one type of what I call them, from lack of better terms. I said I call it positive trauma. Okay? This is one type of positive trauma. But then there is a second type of positive trauma. It is something that we build day by day by creating these positive experiences, and they are slowly building up until we get into the same place, until we get into that level of that same mystical experience. And this is what sadhana, this is what spiritual practice is all about. Spiritual practice is about building up our positive trauma. Is about day by day creating this gradual and slow growth, but it is definitely building up. If we want to build it up, we need to understand the mind and how it works. If we want these impressions to be strong and powerful, now we understand what we have to do. Just sitting for meditation every day, boring ourselves to death, is not going to create much change, right? Our practice must be full of enthusiasm, full of love, full of positive emotions, and attention and intention. It must be there. We have to find inspiration in our practice. And this is the reason for inspiration. Inspiration is that energy that allows these impressions to go deeper and deeper. Right? So this is why in spiritual practice we always try to build this inspiration, to build this enthusiasm. Without it, our practice is dead. Without it, there is no progress. It will be just very shallow scratches on the sand. It will not go deeper. That's why people say it doesn't matter how long you meditate. It matters how is your meditation when you are meditating. You know, you want to create the right impressions, you want it to be strong, you want it to be deep. And now, we went quite far, now we are wrapping up and coming back to the ego. You remember we were talking about the ego and our identification with it, and when we look to it, it disappears. Right? That was the moment we left our discussion. So now we are coming back and we can understand it a little better. When we sit as the witness and observe that ego, becoming an observer of the changes of the ego without any involvement, what do? We deprive it of its energy. What is the energy of the ego, of the thoughts? What is the force that giving thoughts power? We said this is intention and thought and emotion, right? But now in our meditation, we deprive the ego from these two. We give it attention, but without identification. I hope it is clear, right? We still give it attention because we observe it. But now there is no identification. It is not me who is thinking so and so and so and so. I'm just observing the thinker. So this attention itself is not giving it any energy, any power. And also when we do it, we are not trapped in the emotions that go along with it. We, in other words, deprive it completely of its energy. And therefore, you sit as the witness, not the body sit. You, as consciousness, the observer, just observe the passing thoughts in the mind without identification. These thoughts lose their power. And we sit for meditation, and suddenly the thoughts are going away. They are just, as soon as they come up, if we are able to stay as the observer, they lose their energy and they go. This is how it works in meditation. When you become a more experienced practitioner, thoughts are still comes at times. Sometimes it may not come more, sometimes less. This is not the point. The point is that thoughts, as they come, they don't have the energy to stay, they will go. And this is what Ramakrishna Paramhamsa was talking about when he was saying that as soon as they tried to look for the ego, it disappeared. Because it is a non-entity, because it is false. Okay? So I think I said quite a lot for 1 hour, and I don't want to add any confusion. So maybe what I will do now, I will open it for questions regarding what I said, or the questions is only in the panel? Either way. So let's start with few questions, then we will have some break, and then we will come back for a group discussion. Okay? Yes.
I'm fascinated and puzzled by the whole process of identification, because we talk loosely about the I identifies with the ego, and yet the I doesn't do anything. So, and yet there is the experience of I being identified with the ego. And so my question is, what is really going on here?
Yeah, it is very subtle, because the identification is not in the I. The identification is in the ego. You see, this is the subtle point, and this is Shankaracharya in the Vivekachudamani is talking about it. It is very subtle and very difficult to touch this point. In the Vivekachudamani, Shankaracharya explains that the mind is ignorance. It's not that the mind has ignorance. It is not that ignorance has the mind. It's the mind is ignorance. This whole bundle that we call mind is the snake. What do I mean, the snake? Many of you know this analogy of the snake and the rope. There is a little story about a person who walks in twilight in his garden, and suddenly he sees a snake by his feet, a poisonous snake, and he is freezing. He is afraid to move. He calls a friend from the house, shouting, come quickly and bring a flashlight. That friend comes running and bring a flashlight and turn on the light on the snake, only to realize it is not a snake, it is a rope. Okay, this is a very famous analogy. It is called, in Sanskrit, Raju Sarpa Nyaya. It is one of the most classical analogies. Shankaracharya says that this world, the whole world, is like this snake, which is superimposed on the rope, which is consciousness. Last night we explained that consciousness is the ground of being, is the basis. This is reality. But somehow, mysteriously, there is ignorance. And in this ignorance, there is superimposition of a snake over a rope. There is a superimposition of a world over pure consciousness. In reality, the truth, according to this philosophy, is that consciousness alone is. Consciousness is never mixed, is never changed, is never affected by anything. So the self, myself, that consciousness is not affected by the least by identification. Identification is part of the ignorance. Identification is in the mind of the mind. It is the ego which is the identification. In other words, from the point of view of the self, there is never ignorance. There is never identification. There is never suffering. From the point of view of pure consciousness, there is only what we call Satchit Ananda. Existence absolute, consciousness absolute, bliss absolute. This is the nature of consciousness, the nature of the self. It is there even right here and right now. That identification with the body and the mind is wrong, is ignorance, is an illusion. It is not a real identification. For this reason, Shankara says the mind itself is ignorance. You see, from the rope's point of view, there is never snake. There is never snake from the rope's point of view. It is not snake before the snake appear. It is not snake while there is the appearance, and it is not snake after it is gone. Only from the snake point of view, there is snake at this particular time, and before not, and after not. You know? So the answer to your question is that there is never identification is not of the self. The self is not identifying. Because if we say that the self is identifying, then it is changeful. Right? We said at the beginning, we say it is changeless. How can it change? How it can remain changeless if it is identifying sometimes and not identifying on other times? So the identification is of the ego. But this ego is a non-entity. And this is the challenge. It is very, very, very subtle point. Thank you. It's either very clear or no clue. Oh, we have a question there. Okay, good.
I'll just keep things going, even though I have no clue. But I was just wondering, I mean, you were talking about, the subconscious and everything, and that in the Vedantic world, all the subconscious continues on through generation after generation, through different souls or people. So where do you think this information is stored? If it's, you seem to be saying that it's not stored in the mind.
It is stored in the mind, but I will
but not the individual mind, not in the hardware.
Not in the brain.
Not in the brain, right?
Not in the brain. Yes.
So
where it is stored? It's a very good question. This is
no,
the
but
question.
I mean,
yeah.
But you're individualizing the mind then. For everybody has their own minds.
Yeah.
And their own individual storage
Yes.
spaces.
Yes. Okay. So that's a very big question. I don't know if I will have the time to answer the whole question. But basically, as I explained last night, have you been there last night? Very good. In the classic understanding, the building blocks of reality is matter and energy and information. Okay? In the Vedantic point of view, the building block of reality is consciousness. Both the mind and the body is an appearance within consciousness. More even than that, I would say carefully, it is even the mind itself, the way we perceive it, and the body is within the mind. So when we turn the pyramid off, it changes the whole understanding of it. You are asking where it is stored. Of course, it is not stored in the body because the body is product of that. The body is a product. It's a what we call a modification of the mind, basically. So it cannot be stored in that. So where is the storage of the mind? Where is the mind stored in this understanding? Well, there is a description of what we call the evolution of Prakriti, which is basically the evolution of the manifested reality, which includes the external world and the internal world also. And in this, I will not get into it. There is a slow process of evolution. And in that, the mind itself is considered to be matter. But for that, it is considered to be subtle matter. We say that the mind is made of the subtle 5 elements. We call them tanmatas. Okay? It is not perceivable by the 5 senses, but it is also matter. It has its own space. It has its own dimensions, and it is made of the subtle elements. This is a description. It is not like saying that that this water bottle is made of plastic and filled with water. It is just more like principles. Okay, so don't take it so literally, but this is the way it is described. For this purpose, the mind itself is matter. And within the mind, which is non-physical, and this I tried to demonstrate in the beginning of this lecture when I talked about this hemispherectomy, that we take half of the brain and still we have the memories. If the memories are stored in the brain, we should lose at least some of the memories when we take half of the brain. So I don't know, I don't have other explanation for this, but from our point of view, there is no problem. Because even when there is no brain, there is still mind. And that mind is in some space that we don't have access to it through the five senses, but it doesn't mean that it is not there. Now, this mind is also, we can see it when we talk about phenomena like near-death experience, which is something that was studied very well. And I found that many times when I hear modern scientific lectures, and people like to ignore it. But today we have a lot of study, a lot of research into this phenomena, which is called near-death experience. And particularly I'm familiar with the work of Raymond Moody, Professor Raymond Moody, who is probably the father of this subject branch of studies, and he's coming here every year. And I know him personally. He's the most amazing person, and he's a very true scientist. It is not some funky new agey idea. It is somebody who dedicated his life to study this subject of near-death experience. And he is saying that, yes, now, after 50 years of research, I'm quite confident. This is almost his words. He says, I'm quite confident that near-death experience is a real phenomenon and not just a phantom of the brain. And which means basically that even when the brain is shut off, we are still experiencing and the mind is still functioning. And that at least suggests that, if we accept it, that at least suggests that the mind is not product of the brain, and it is functioning even when the brain is not there, and therefore the memories will go along with that mind, whatever that be. Okay? What happens when a person dies? In our tradition, in our system, it is coming from very old scriptures, so it is described in very old language and very old terminology. We probably have to try to put it in words that we can understand and appreciate. It is described that when a person dies, the prana, the life force, the life energy is leaving the body, and it is said in the Gita, in chapter 15, Manashashtani indriyani prakritistani karshati. The self, so to say, the Atma, consciousness, is, so to say, it is not really really happening, but it is just a description. The self is leaving the body and is taking along with it Manashashtani indriyani. It is taking with it the mind and the five senses. In other words, when the body falls, when the body dies, the mind doesn't die. The mind is still there. Okay? And the mind has its own experiences and its own memories. As a matter of fact, and this is another hard nut to break, okay? Our lifetime, what we call a lifetime, in our description of karma and reincarnation, it is very difficult. I'm trying to find the words because it is something that I will need at least 1 hour to present, and then it will be maybe a little bit clear, but I will try to say it in one sentence, okay? So forgive me if it sounds very strange. what we call a lifetime, this experience, is nothing but the manifestation of our past karma within our mind. Right now, I perceive myself as sitting here and talking to you, and you are over there, and you are separate from me. And even if I close my eyes and go to sleep, you are still here, and everything is going on. In Advaita Vedanta philosophy, it is not so. What I see, what I feel, what I experience is only the result of my past actions. The way I see the world, the way I see myself is just nothing else. It is just my past karma popping up, coming to be experienced. And that's it. There is nothing else. There is nothing else. This, what we call reality, is nothing but my karma. It is my karma manifesting as this. So I don't need a place to store my memories. This very reality is my past karma manifesting as this. I don't need to store my memories in that. That itself is the result of my past karma. I know it is not, it is not
sufficient,
but yeah.
Just to go along with that.
Yeah.
So
And
two parents have children, right? I mean, two people get together, they procreate, have a child, so we're getting karma from both sides?
No.
How does that
Sorry,
work?
yeah, okay. Karma is personal. You don't pass your karma to your children. You carry your own karma from one life to another. There is no passing of karmas. We pass genes, we pass many things, but we don't pass our karma. Karma means if I now speak to you, okay, in a particular manner, I create some impression in my subconscious mind, we discuss about it, I leave this samskara. Okay? This samskara is sitting in my subconscious mind like a seed. Okay? And at certain point, there will be particular circumstances that will provoke this same karma, and at that time, that karma will come back to me. I will be sitting, and somebody will be talking to me and teaching me something, for example. So that will be the result. It will be that same karma that I created by action is now coming back to me as an experience. Okay? So all my experiences are the result of something I did in the past, not something that my parents did.
So once you die, that karma's out there and it inhabits, does it enter other life forms?
Yes. So the way it is described, it is not out there because there is no in there also. It is just that which is the mind, which that mind creating this lifetime. And when this lifetime is over, I still have a bunch of karmas, a bunch of experiences that I have created, but I still didn't get the result. I didn't experience the result, the fruit, what we call. Okay, and therefore, a group of those karmas is formed together, and that determines the place I am born, the type of body I have, the type of mentality I have, and certain experiences that I'm going to have in this particular lifetime. And while I'm living that lifetime, I'm still creating fresh karmas. And these fresh karmas will have to be experienced also, and therefore I have to come back again, and it goes again and again and again. This is what we call samsara.
So why do a group of karmas, how do they get attached to a certain person who's born? I mean,
wow, this
what
is
brings that
I'm
all
sorry,
about?
These are all very good questions, but basically what happens at the time of death, when you leave the body, your mind, at that time, the prarabdha karma, the karmas for next lifetime is being formed, we call it prarabdha karma. It has to do with the state of mind that you have at that particular moment. It attracts to itself particular type of karmas, right? If at the time when you die, your mind is very peaceful and calm, it attracts such karmas which are resonating with this. And next life, you will be born in very, what we say, favorable circumstances. If you die with a lot of fear or anger, that attracts to itself this type of karmas, this type of karmic seeds, and next time you may be born right here. Right? This is what we say, we are born in, we are in karma bhumi. That is the result of Rajasic karmas. We collected, we associated with ourselves these mixed karmas, some of them more pleasant, some of them less, but they resonate with that particular time. Okay, but we have to leave it right here because this is not at all our subject. Yes, okay, last quick question and then we will take a short break and go to the discussion. Yeah.
So it will be quick, maybe we can hear me?
Yeah, we hear you well.
Maybe we can continue. The whole issue of doership, you touch upon it, and we did touch upon it. My teacher, whenever he would say, people ask him what you're doing or what you're doing, he would always point to Nityananda, his guru, and he would say, he's doing everything, I don't do anything. And I actually really believed it. I could feel it. I could experience what he was saying. I've noticed myself a few times in my own life when somehow I'm not in that ego state, or at least I'm not doing the doership, then things, what we called before, synchronicity happen, and some sort of like grace takes place. But this, I guess I want to touch upon the subject of the guru and the doership.
Okay. This is another small subject that we can spend a week about. Okay, I will again keep it very, very short, okay? It is very, very interesting point. I'm writing a poem. I'm composing a poem, okay? And now I'm asking, who is the poet? Okay, who is the poet? You understand the questions. Now let us start a short investigation, a quick short investigation. Is the poet the pen which is writing the poem? Why not? You say no, but why not?
The pen does not control itself.
The pen doesn't have a control. In other words, the pen is not conscious. A pen cannot write a poem, right? What about the hand? Is the hand the poet? The hand is not the poet. Why? For the same reason. What about the nerves that go to the brain? Is the nerve the poet? No. What about the brain? Is it the poet? No. We need to discuss more about it, but no. It is not the brain also, because the brain is matter. The brain is not conscious. The brain is just matter. What about the mind? Is the mind the poet? That starts to be more subtle, right? The mind is not the poet. Why? Same reason. The mind is also matter. We say this mind is made of subtle matter. We can demonstrate it. The mind is coming and going. In itself, a thought is not a poet. To say that the mind is the poet is like saying a thought is the poet. Can a thought be a poet? No. It doesn't have any agency, okay? It's not a doer. What about the self? Is the self the poet? If you say that the self is the poet, then the self is changing. I tried so much to explain to you that the self is changeless. The self is not the doer. Then who is the poet? It's not the pen, it's not the hand, it's not the nerve, it's not the brain, it's not the mind, it's not the self. Who is the poet? Can you show me a poet? But you cannot deny it because I have a poem in my hand. Somebody has to be the poet. This is the problem of doership. This is the whole problem of doership. And Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita is giving a very interesting answer. Who is the poet? The three gunas. The three gunas are the poet. The problem is that the three gunas I don't know, many of you may not know the three gunas. We don't have the time to discuss it. These are like the three qualities of nature, which we can, if you want, we can translate it into matter, energy, and information. Okay? These are three qualities that are responsible for all manifestation. Krishna says the three gunas are the doer. Why? Because I'm reminding you the example of all the projector of the movie that Peter talked about the other day. Who is the creator of the drama? Is it the projector, the white light? No. Is it the screen? No. This is what we call the film is the creator of the drama, so to say. In this sense, the film is that whole totality of what we call nature, and this is the three gunas. There is no any other explanation, and the reason is that, truly speaking, there is no drama. There is only screen and few lights are playing on it. There is no drama. When you see a house burning up in the movie, there is no house burning. Promise you. It is only some lights playing on a canvas, on a screen. There was never house burning. There is no house burning. It will not burn. It is just an illusion. Because we take it real, we ask, who is burning the house? In the same way, we see here a poem, and we are asking, who is writing the poem? The answer is, the whole thing is just superimposition. It is my own karmas popping up, manifesting as all this. It is ultimately an illusion. So there is no better answer. Now, regarding your Guruji, if I may interpret what he was saying, once you realize the truth, once you realize you are not the body, you are not the mind, you are not the doer, you remain as the witnessing consciousness. Who is taking charge? We say that at that time the divine is flowing through you. Basically, that divine is just flowing, is just walking through you at that time. And this is the meaning that Nityananda is the divine. For him and for us, Nityananda is representing the divine. This is a divine will flowing through me. I am not the doer, I am just a witness. We are going to stop here, take a little break and meet. What? 10 minutes. At 1:40. 1 minute, sit. 1 minute. We will do a short meditation and prayer, and then we will conclude. Basically, it is good after we do a study, just for a moment, let the thing just sink a little bit, and then also we remember our teachers, we remember our tradition. It is the way to do it. Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Peace Peace Peace. Bolo Shri Sadgurudev Swami Shivananda Maharaj Ki Jai. Shri Sadgurudev Swami Vishnudevananda Maharaj Ki Jai.